Welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar. We are getting into it today for 60 minutes of getting ready for auto classification. As we are planning for 2026 projects and implementations, these are kind of the things that you can do and get ready for to implement an auto classification solution. If we haven't met before, my name is Jen Nelson. I'm the VP of Strategic Solutions at Valora Technologies, and joining me is Sandy Serkis, who is co-founder and CEO of Valora Technologies. And we are so thrilled to have you here today. It really makes us happy when we see, that registration lift beef up and everybody join. So we thank you. We appreciate it. In our webinar series, you are here today at getting ready for auto classification, again, as we kind of look towards 2026. But if you've missed any of our past webinars this year, they're all available on our website. If you want to hit us up at valoratech.com and go over to webinars and events, I think you will find the on-demand recordings and slide decks for all of these presentations. Next month, we are having a demo. If you are too afraid to ask me for a demo, that's okay. You can come next month to our webinar and we will walk you through demos, soup to nuts, on all the different use cases that you can use Valora for. So you're more than welcome to come to that next month. And literally and figuratively, I have snuck one in there for December, on December 10th. We've got some friends joining us. Rich Lowers and Mimi Dion are joining us for kind of a retrospective 2025 and a looking ahead to 2026 on predicting what those kind of trends will be in information governance. So that's going to be an awesome conversation because those three are just bonkers. Okay. Let's get in a good way, Oh, and my little don't forget to mention info on 2020. Don't forget, we're going to be there next week. So if you are attending ARMA next week in Phoenix, we would love to meet up with you and grab a lunch or grab a drink or whatever in a conversation. So find us in the little ARMA app. They've got a great app for those events. And then we'll find each other while we're there. So if you are new to Valora and don't know much about what we do, let me give you a 30-second rundown. We are celebrating 25 years in business this year, which is awesome. We provide an information governance platform that leverages auto classification technology and machine learning algorithms to help automate the identification, the discovery, the classification, and the disposition of content, regardless where it lives across the enterprise. And we mostly work with IG teams, records teams, information, compliance, IT teams, legal teams, anybody who needs to know where their data is, to help bring those multiple repositories into a single view to be able to manage that data. Now, not only do we help bring those multiple repositories into a view, but we do helping to align multiple use cases, because it used to be that information governance and records management was kind of like find the record, keep the record, remove the record at the appropriate time. But we know now that every piece of information that we create has its own life cycle, while accounting for things like legal hold and data privacy and things like that. So ultimately, this is what Valora brings to the table is not only that single pane of glass view into all of the content, but the ability to then defensively manage all of these data governance use cases through a single platform. So that's a little bit about us. And how about you? So when you register, we like to ask you a few questions about kind of what your interests are, where you're coming from, kind of what's getting your goat lately in your IG practice. So from the folks who registered, we often see it, lots of people in records management and information management, but often this year, and more so this year, people with added responsibilities, be it knowledge management, record and compliance, record and data privacy and security. So it's really interesting to see kind of the evolution of that records and information management role. So welcome. And then, of course, we ask you, so what's keeping you up at night for this year? And lots of things, everything from raw to records. I don't know what I have, dark data. I need to automate manual processes. I need to help legal hold. Certainly getting ready for AI readiness is becoming a more prominent challenge. And then the good old OMG, everything. And the good news, I hate it to be a spoiler alert, but you're in the right place because all of these things can happen with a single platform. So I won't ruin the ending though. For our housekeeping, the Q&A is open and you can use the chat or you can use the actual Q&A button, whatever floats your boat there. Sandy and I will be looking at those, making sure that we respond to those. The recording and the slides will be available to you after this webinar. We'll probably get that out tomorrow morning. And of course, feedback. We welcome feedback all the time. Is what we're talking about relevant? Is there things that you would like to see? We would love your feedback and always kind of take that into account. But today, talking about getting ready for auto classification. Okay, we've got 55 minutes, Sandy. I think we can do it. We're going to do a bit of just what are you guys talking about when you're talking about auto classifications? Just a little kind of minute overview on auto classification 101. And then we're really going to talk about the different aspects of building almost a project plan when you're implementing a solution like this. So building your case, building your team around you for that project collaboration to ensure success. We're going to talk about building your budget and how you can kind of align maybe different departments with budget, find that budget alignment and get that approval. Building your plan, what does that look like? Making sure that you're kind of implementing your business objectives. And then how do you get started? And what can you expect when you are kind of kicking off an implementation of this type and size? So that's what we'll be talking about today. And if there's anything you want to add to this or like you'd like us to chat about that maybe not be here, again, type us in the Q&A in the chat and we'll make sure that we address those things as we go. So first up, what is auto classification? What are we talking about when we talk about implementing an auto classification solution? So again, spoiler alert, Valora is an auto classification or information governance platform or solution. And true auto classification is relying on software and the recognition algorithms and the disposition algorithms of that software to determine the actions and the classification and the actions that the system is going to take. So it is the software performing that analysis and those decision makings with its machine learning algorithms to identify what is this thing and what do I do with it, and then ultimately does it with it. So that is auto classification. We are not relying on humans to do it. There's certainly humans in the loop, like there is any type of AI when you're implementing that, but we're not relying on humans to do the classification and the heavy lifting. When the system first looks to determine attributes of a document, it will use those file attributes to pull out that data to become the rich metadata that will be attached to that document or file. So usually when you're looking at a file share, that system generated metadata is created date, created by, last access date, which tells you nothing about the contents of that file. So what we will do is go in and do a full text analysis and start pulling out that rich metadata. So rather than last access date, maybe we're looking at it's a signature on a contract. So we're looking at the signature date or the effective date or the renewal date or the expiration date as an example. Then we'll go through and apply recognition algorithms. So by the content that it's reading in a document, it will determine what type of document that is based on your records retention schedule. So it's finding, service and dates and terms and conditions. Oh, it's a service agreement. And then when it determines what kind of document type that is, then you can apply disposition algorithms again to that document to say, if it's this, then do this. And it can be as simple or as complex in those rules with the disposition algorithms as we need to be. So if it's an employment contract sitting all out willy-nilly on a file share, mark it as confidential, move it to the appropriate place in SharePoint, retain it for 8 years after this new employee has been terminated. So we haven't even contemplated that date yet. And then before it's scheduled for deletion, make sure we get HR approval before we destroy it, dispose of it. So there's a lot of if-then rules that we can apply there, and we can move it, we can delete it, we can anonymize it, we can migrate it, we can hold it, we can redact it, we can archive it, whatever you need to do, or you would rely on people or your IT team to do, and take those appropriate steps. We can now rely on an information governance or auto classification platform to do that, as we know, is heavy lifting for us. And an example of this auto classification, this is something that you would see in a file share. You know, the name of the file, last modified, LGPIF doesn't tell us anything about that, that data. So what we're going to do is open that document and start to read it and pull out those bits of metadata. So it's a contract. The effective date is here. The two parties involved. There's keywords, the terms, the renewal terms. And the system and the software is going to determine this is a contract. It belongs to this record class. We need to keep it for 5 years after the expiration date, not the last modified date or created date. You know, its sensitivity, it should be confidential, it should only be available to these users, whatever that is. And do we keep it? Where do we keep it? When it's past its retention, what do we do with it and how do we handle it? So that's an example of auto-classifying a specific individual document. And when we look at structured data, we can kind of use those same principles when looking at structured data, because if you've ever seen an exported structured database, it is a bit of a squint test in trying to figure out what that is. So we can auto classify the records in a database within a single database record, but then keep that database record together in its kind of own mockument, was what we'll say when we auto classify structured data. And it really is an easy way for humans to interact with hundreds and thousands of rows of data. So we'll display that as a mockument so that you can easily kind of pull out that record and see that information, and again apply any of those use cases that you need to, whether it be retention or auto, whatever. So that's at the structured data level. And then at enterprise level, bringing it all together is, you know, when we say, you know, well, we're working Microsoft and Teams, like, sure you do, but there's data everywhere. And everybody in your organization is usually asking the same questions of, oh my gosh, what do we have? Where is it? Who has access to it? Is this under retention? Is this past retention? Is this junk? And so we take a 5-step approach to analyzing all of this. So we'll first hook into all of those systems and do a data discovery to figure out what everything is and where everything is. We'll do an intelligent analysis, and this is where we read everything to figure out what it is so that we can auto-classify and determine what the document type is, how it should be handled, who should have access to it. And then we can apply defensible disposition algorithms, again, to say, oh, it's here, move it here. Oh, it's rot, okay to delete it. Oh, this is, you know, in Sandy's folder and it's rot, treat it like this. So there's many different ways that we can apply those automated rules and workflows. And then we go back and do it all over again. Every day we're creating, you know, thousands and thousands of files and documents. So eventually you will get to a near real-time view of your entire data estate. And that's really what an auto classification tool brings to the table, because it is so valuable in understanding what we have, where it is, who has access, how do we treat it, and all of that. So with our when we talk about and think about implementing an auto classification solution, it's kind of like, it's absolutely a bit of where do we even start? But these are the different use cases that we find most businesses are using an auto classification tool for. So just by the nature of what it's doing physically, it lends itself very well to all of these different use cases. So certainly data discovery and classification, you know, uncovering dark data, figuring out where it is, what it is, how it should be handled. The second is rotten file cleanup. So we know, depending on what study you look at, you're looking at between 40 and 60% of your content is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. So the ability to find and identify that and then actually get rid of it is huge for storage, for efficiency, and for all those things. The third is records management. So the ability to understand what documents are, classify them as, you know, records or other record classes, and then be able to manage them through their whole life cycle. That is the third biggest. Data privacy and governance, risk, and other compliance. Once you know where your data is, and certainly if you're in a regulated industry, knowing and proving and being ready for an audit at any time. Also a great use case. Legal hold and e-discovery, so reliable data collection at that time, and then AI readiness, as most businesses are, dipping their toes into AI, and using their corporate data as the large language model training data set. It is so important that that data set be vetted and cleaned. So we'll talk a little bit about that later, but that I would say is the sixth biggest use case for using auto classification.
Jen, can I jump in here for a second?
Of
Just
course.
because the kind of the banner today is about, becoming ready for auto classification. There are some very specific use cases that are kind of implied in these six, which are sometimes kind of like beacons for, I need auto classification now, now, now. So I'll put them out there for people, because if you are facing these situations, they're a really good kind of magnet for this kind of technology. So the first one would be if you are suffering from a data breach, and I'll put that loosely under the data discovery and classification bucket. But if, unfortunately you have suffered from that, and you are under a deadline to identify what was breached and who, and, all of that, auto classification is a really, really smart solution. And it's kind of it's going to give you exactly what you need to satisfy the requirements of responding to that breach. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, kind of similar, hopefully less onerous, but you never know, would be a litigation matter. Being able to quickly do your data collection, to be able to do your refinement down to a useful set for actually putting through a more formal document review process. So again, litigation is kind of a good, siren call. And then the third one is, and a lot of our organizations are still kind of quickly making that switch over to Windows 11 because the deadline was, I think, yesterday. But any kind of system that you're going to be sunsetting, where you're not really sure what's in there, you're not sure if it's got records, you're not sure how long you need to keep it, or who's going to be offended if we just dump it, that kind of sunsetting repository or application scenario, also an excellent time to kind of trot out the auto classification as the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Back to
Yeah,
you.
totally. Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for that, Sandy. And the main benefits of implementing and using auto classification, if you need something in your back pocket to say, when someone asks you why, because I'm sure we have a tool internally that can do this. The benefits of using auto classification is certainly reduces errors and inconsistencies and oversight by asking humans, here's your policy, please implement it on all the data that you make every day. That does not happen. As hard as we try, and as open sometimes as people are to doing it and to helping information governance out and understanding the priorities, it just doesn't happen. And it's difficult and frustrating when you create your policies and plans and it's just like it goes into the wind. It's frustrating. So reducing those errors and also reducing the risks of not having it classified appropriately, and relying on your on teams and departments and humans to be able to do that. That it is right all the time, because it is defensible. Everything that every action that's taken, every decision that is made is defensible and auditable and trackable, so that the hows and the whys the decisions were made. It ensures a compliance, whether that be internal with your internal policies or external industry regulations. You have that single pane of glass where you can see everything. You don't need to have access into all of those things, or go in and out of different systems. You've kind of got that 30,000-foot view into all of your systems. It's easy for data collection and searching, and of course, evergreen. And that's where that Delta monitoring comes in. At whatever cadence makes sense to that kind of data set, you always know what's there. So those are some of the biggest benefits of implementing. So let's talk about building your case. Like where do you even start? A lot of people think they need it, and a lot of people do, but it is, how do you start to plan? And then again, of course, getting the right people around the table. So do you need auto classification? You may need auto classification if you have a lot of data sources, multiple sources, and it's everywhere. And I can't find the stuff that I need, and I can't find it quickly because I don't even know if I'm looking at the right version. Am I missing something when I'm doing a search? If it's for e-discovery or a data subject access request, it's very important that you're finding the right things. Am I missing stuff? Is this one I'm looking at the right version of what I'm looking at? Is this being out here all willy-nilly an IG or a compliance risk? And am I always looking for this? Do I find myself 3 times a week kind of looking for the same kind of things? There are other people in my organization doing the same kind of things, having the same kinds of challenges sitting in legal, or the same kinds of challenges finding things sitting in HR. So is there a collective need across the organization? And the biggest thing, and kind of that finding that pain point, is usually the risk, because not only is it, by fines or monetary, but it's also the risk of breach and things like that. So when we talk about risk, there's a few different areas of risk, and what's the most important? It completely depends on who you're asking. So on the internal policy side, you've got retention, storage, access. The people concerned are usually the IG or the IM people. Maybe it's legal, maybe it's the GC, maybe it's the HR manager. Everyone in this group is concerned about managing retention schedules, good hygiene with legal, and HR making sure that their data is in the right spot. On the regulatory compliance side, in heavily regulated industries like oil and gas or pharmaceuticals or healthcare, making sure that your documents are stored and filed correctly for the governing body that you kind of fall underneath, and be able to prove it and be audit ready at any time. So that's really the compliance team or the CFO or CISO that are worried about that. On the data privacy and compliance side, usually the data privacy officer, the chief information security officer, or whoever is responsible for, the data privacy requests that come in. So the data subject access request, either under GDPR or CCPA or wherever you happen to live. Because it's real. The penalties and the fines are significant. And we've got webinars on that. You can kind of go through our site to see what that is and what they're actually, what's real. That's real. It's not a threat anymore. On the risk of security compliance, is the sensitive content identified as sensitive, and is it locked down? Do the right people have access to what they need? And it's not too open? And then, of course, and Sandy mentioned with data breach reporting. So if in the unfortunate circumstance that you are breached, the ability to inform and report on what content was compromised internally, and then also maybe to clients or other parties that may have been affected, that is huge. And the clock starts ticking once you're aware of the breach. So the ability to be able to quickly turn to a tool and say, I know exactly what was in there, and I know what our risk is very important. And then the last one,
and I'll jump in.
Sorry,
I'll
Sandy,
jump
go
in
ahead.
there because
Yeah.
One of the things that I would kind of recommend people do is to kind of perform some measurements on how long it takes you. This was on your past slide too, about sort of this notion of time. Time is money, time is risk. How long does it take you to fulfill a request? When someone says, I need everything related to so-and-so because they're part of a class action lawsuit. Is that, can you produce that data in 5 seconds or less, or is that like a 3-month effort? Same question, ex-employee has filed DSAR, or there's just an internal inquiry and we need everything related to topic X. These are relatively easy test cases that you can almost kind of run like a dress rehearsal and see how hard is it to actually produce that information at all. In other words, how long did it take? How many systems did you have to hit? How many person hours did it take to produce it, right? That's just at the outset. And then there's the secondary question of, was that the right stuff? Was that the most recent version? Is that the one that needs to go to court? Is that the one that I need to train the AI? And that this isn't really the topic today. We also have whole webinars on AI readiness, but the last thing you want is for your AI to get its claws onto the wrong version of a document, because now it is all completely messed up and it's working on obsolete or perhaps incorrect data. So this notion of, is it the right one or is it the best one, takes on tremendous significance in an AI world. Less so when we were in sort of more of a human interaction with data kind of way, because humans can kind of tell, oh, I have two of these. This one's later. This is the one. This is the ones that sign. We can kind of tell that. AI can't always. And so having that definitive AI, you may have this document, you may not have this one. That whole notion of there's kind of the spectrum of acceptability in content raises the risk profile here.
Absolutely. And the common thread for all of these risks, whether it be internal, external, privacy, whatever, is what everyone's asking the same question. What is this thing? Where is it? What do I have? How long should we keep it? Who should have access? And when or if we need it, can we retrieve it in a timely fashion? And it's really up to the organization, whatever your priorities are, whether your business operations and your business goals are, in determining what is that biggest priority, what is that pain point. Some may say, well, it's an internal policy. It's, the sky's not going to fall if we're 3 weeks out of, deleting a document that should have been deleted 3 weeks ago. And that's true. But, if you can make your own call on your AI training models and your security compliance, but those are usually the biggest ones, is data privacy, security, and regulatory compliance that we see anyways. And if you have all of these things and you don't know where to start, the nice thing about working with an auto classification provider is that we will help you. We will help you determine what those priorities are, or help you assess what those biggest risks are, so that we can kind of point in those directions and tackle those highest priorities first. So
to that point, Jen,
yeah, of course.
Part of what's implicit, certainly in the solution from Valora, is that it's not just technology on a plate. Here you go, run your tech. Now you know what everything is. You're good to go by. There is a lot of expertise that comes into play about auto classification. And this gets into kind of, choosing your vendor wisely. And, the expertise has to live somewhere. So it's either going to live with you all, or it's going to live with your vendor, or ideally both of you, so that you're having a strategic discussion about your data and about the use of technology, not just a sort of tactical run the software and hope everything turns out okay. Because, well, I'm here to tell you it does not work like that, and you will be disappointed if you do that. So part of what we're getting at today, and there's more to come in the webinar today on this, is to get you thinking about what is everything that goes on alongside or behind the technology, so that you can actually use it successfully.
Absolutely. When it comes to building your team, it used to be that, quite often the folks in IG or RM were not invited to the table when important decisions were happening, or business operations and processes were being developed. But I would say in the last 2 years, I'd love to get your feedback on this, that you are being welcomed and you are being invited. And it's like, wait a second, did we invite the IM person to this team? Because this has to do with content and data and enterprise content. So getting that seat at the table and then building your team. Who do you need in your court for that? For each piece of honestly information that's created in a organization, it has a different value or meaning to different groups, right? When your side, you need to, record classes, what's the retention schedule, good data hygiene. On legal, it could be, well, that's under legal hold. A CIO could be, oh, that's confidential. So the same piece of information coming at it from different angles. So questions are, who owns that content and whose goal is most important and what poses the greatest risk and who owns the budget. And each group needs to be compliant with their mandate. So that common goal of really understanding and getting your arms wrapped around the content that you have is so key. And in kind of building that team together, and this is all next week at ARMA, their whole program is kind of built into these chunks of their information governance implementation model. And the first and at the center of implementing an IG is the steering committee. And they recommend, who should be around the table. And it's certainly information governance leadership, the business units, IT, risk, legal compliance. It's all of those people that have those different mandates for each kind of different piece of data. So having a steering committee, a formal steering committee to help steer direction, ability, kind of all those cross-functional collaborations and business processes is huge. And it's really nice when we see businesses who have this nailed down. It's really cool. Because when you've got the shared content, you also then have shares gold, and content management is everyone's issue. And again, rather than kind of pushing those rules from the top down and hoping that people comply, with classifying their data, having this kind of bottom up approach of tell us what it is and we'll just manage it for you. It can be and should be a shared resource. Because everything that the auto classification tool is doing is helping each of these groups in managing their mandate. And so it's centralized management with these really distributed benefits for each of these groups to make sure that they are in line with their business and operational goals for their mandates. And I think the easiest, when you go to find a friend, the closest folks to get on your side, legal, certainly, because they have great interest in making sure that everything is kosher. And then your chief information officer or chief information security officer or somebody from the InfoSec side that will be managing access control and DLP, because they'll want to make sure that what they're locking down is what they should be locking down. So those are kind of the two groups. Then Sandy, you jump in if you think there's other groups there too.
I was thinking that I would say in the last maybe year or 18 months, definitely have seen an increase in kind of alignment with IT. Whereas in years past, I felt like sort of IT and information governance really were kind of sort of almost unaware of each other. That has come way more together. I think the folks in IT who are responsible for infrastructure, to some degree responsible for content at a high level, at sort of maybe the folder level max. But they are at least aware that someone out there is beating the drum about we need to get rid of data. And that brings the story in alignment, because IT is watching the storage cost go through the roof as everything moves to the cloud and nothing gets deleted. That brings IT and InfoGov right up together, kind of lockstep. So we've seen more and more IT showing up at things like ARMA, at events like this, and just really bringing a lot more to the conversation than I think we used to see in the past. So personally, I'm incredibly encouraged by that. I'm glad that dialogue is happening between IT and IG. It is long overdue, and I'm delighted to see it playing out.
Absolutely. And a big question that we often get is who needs to be involved? So once you've got, support and buy-in from different groups, who do you need day to day to get something like this off the ground? And the first is certainly someone in the information governance group who will be, the champion and the project lead, but also someone who knows what to do with everything. And they know how to manage it. They know what these things are and how long we should keep them and where we should keep them. The second is the subject matter expert, and that's maybe a department head or someone in the business line who knows what this content is. So information governance person kind of knows what it is at a high level, but this SME is going to know what exactly this document is used for. The nice thing is that they don't really need a lot of heavy involvement in this entire process because it's the system doing the heavy lifting. What you'll rely on the subject matter expert for, the department leads, is to say, is this right? And starting to validate some of the results that are coming back because they know what they're looking at. And then the third group is IT. So depending on the deployment, whether you deploy this entire thing in your cloud or you have us host it, it really depends on how heavily IT is going to be involved, but we absolutely, for any kind of system like this, you need a way into those systems. So they control the access. So they know what things are, where they are, and they can grant permissions and access to third-party systems to be able to kind of enter their data stores and do their thing.
Jen,
so that's what we're going to need. So go ahead.
On how to identify kind of the right SME. If you're with a large organization, there's probably SMEs, all over the place. Every department head is an SME. So the one to find is the one who's constantly under pressure to find data for some reason. Might be HR, right? There's always some sort of personnel issue of some kind. There's always some sort of lawsuit going on or whatever. That party is perpetually having to find all the information related to X. So that's a good choice SME. They also, because they do it a lot, they are probably familiar with their data. Again, just because they're familiar with their data doesn't mean it's managed well or it's being, properly kept according to retention rules. It's probably not. We all know that. But they are going to be a good starting point because they have this need all the time and they're probably struggling to keep up or to execute in a timely fashion. That party that's always calling you for assistance, can you help me find everything? That's your SMA to get started.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about building your budget. So you've got your priorities, you got your team around you. Now, how much is this going to cost and how can I realize ROI when implementing a system like this? So when we talk about budget, we're not only talking about the cost of it. Of course, you're talking about the technology and the proper tools. That's going to cost actual dollars. But you also need to consider, investing people's time in assessing and kind of that collaboration. And then the time also in respecting the process. It's not unusual for a business to take 18 to 24 months to even decide that this is something that they want to implement in their organization. It's a heavy lift and it is a lot of data and it is a lot of people around the table. So expect for it not to happen overnight and it to possibly take that long. When we talk about budgeting and ROI, what we've done is put together a little calculator for you. And I'm going to send a link to this because I can't interact with this, although I tried with my PowerPoint slides and I tried switching back to Excel. It wasn't happening for me. So I'm just going to kind of talk you through this and walk you through this so that when you get this Excel, you can play around with it. So we've created an ROI calculator that looks at the different individual use cases and then kind of that all up use case. So when you open your Excel spreadsheet, you're going to have different tabs on the bottom that has ROT, records management, data privacy, e-discovery, and then cost sharing between all of those use cases. So when you open your ROT calculator, you're going to put in how many estimated total terabytes. If you know what your hosting fees are, either per gig or terabyte per month or per year, put that in and it'll do that calculation for you. Here in estimated amount of rot, we put 50%, but if you think you have more than that, or if you want to see if I had 40%, what would it look like? If I had 60%, what would it look like? It's going to do some of those calculations for you. And then you can, again, based on how many terabytes you're storing, at what cost, this is just rot. It's going to kind of spit out your total ROI percentage per year. So that's rot. On the record side, when we're looking a little bit further into records class, records types, and retention handling and things like that, same kind of thing. You're going to put how many estimated terabytes you have. And we kind of say maybe a terabyte is usually about 3 million documents. So it's going to tell, you're going to tell it how many terabytes you have. What's the average cost that you pay somebody in managing this? Records classification and retention efforts, not, and that question is not to replace an individual. There's not enough people ever in information governance, but it is to highlight the dollar value ROI that you can gain from this. So it's going to do, if I had 250 terabytes, I'm paying somebody $80,000 a year. It's going to take me 7 years to manually auto classify, and that would cost $14 million over 7 years to be able to do that. So again, it's going to do that ROI calculation for you for records. For e-discovery, same thing. Put your values in your yellow things and it will do that calculation for you. And then for this one's privacy and data requests, and it could be anything, knowledge management searches or FOIA requests or e-discovery or any kind of investigations or an event where you would have to have someone go looking for something. So you can put, and this is where Sandy was saying, do your assessment to see what are you doing now? Well, it takes us 80 hours to perform to one search and 20 people and average salary, all of those things that we kind of talked about before. So put those in the yellow boxes and it's going to calculate that ROI. And then on the last tab of this spreadsheet, you are going to see what that all up ROI is, because it's not just ROT or records or data privacy. It's all of those things. And you can certainly share the love when you're budgeting, but you can also share that ROI across all of those different departments as well. So a very valuable tool to at least give you an idea of what you're talking about, when you have those meetings and have those conversations about budget and your expected return on investment there. So let's go into building your plan. So how do you do implementation and execution? So, we know what we need, we know where we're going to start, we've got our team, we've got our budget. Now, how on earth do you even set priorities and where do you even start? And this is where working with a provider like Valora that has that expertise, it really comes in helpful because we've done it 1,000 times and we've worked with a lot of different content. We can see what that risk is, even just kind of from doing core samples of kind of documents to say, did you know you had all this in here? So it's helpful to work with a vendor who will work with you to help prioritize as well. And ultimately, when speaking about Valora specifically, when you work with Valora, we really act as an extension of your team. Yes, it is 90% of the we're doing it, but you also have the methodology and the experience of a team that will take all this off your plate for you. So again, really act as an extension of your team, and will help you prioritize. So before starting, and this is an important one, is to kind of identify and discuss, and we will start pulling this out of you, important topics to solidify before we even start. And the first is implementation and migration plan. So where do you want to host it? What does InfoSec say? What are their requirements? What systems are you going to be pulling from? Maybe it's if you're migrating somewhere, I'm going to keep all the records here. I'm going to keep the working documents here, kind of making those decisions of kind of the lay of the land after, in a perfect world, where's everything going to sit? And, what kind of content do you want to move where? And kind of start to thinking about that implementation and where things are going to live. The second is the long-term content management plans. And that is, are you planning in the next 3 years to sunset some systems that you might want to see what's in there? Because, you might not want to write back and, do a lot to these systems if they're going to be sunset in the next 24 months. So where are you going to put your stuff? What are you going to use long term? And that will also help us to determine, what kind of APIs or connectors are we going to need into these systems? Are they sunset systems? Are they, a lot of homegrown systems? So what are those long-term plans of moving out of some systems and maybe upgrading or going into others? The third is content attributes. So what is important to us now? What do we want to pull out now? And what do we of course, we want to look for raw, we want to look for records, we want to look for data, like does this thing contain personal data for data privacy? If it's maybe client name, maybe it's product name, maybe it's, is this eligible for AI, yes or no? So what are those data facets you want to pull out of your data, and what results are you expecting to see? Or in a perfect world, what would you like to see? And then that really helps us start to build that reality. And then internal operations is, how are you going to use this internally? Some we chat with some organizations who are like, great, we're going to open this up to everybody. You can, but usually it's start baby steps with the information governance team, maybe the legal team, maybe the compliance team, and by identifying your use cases and priorities, that will also help to identify who's going to have access, who's going to, maybe it's the data request team and the legal team, but understanding and help and prioritizing internally about who's going to do that and what they're going to use it for is very helpful in starting to build some of that automation and audit and tracking in the tool as well.
Jen, I will add something here. It's not, again, not explicitly called out in the slide, but I think it's important for people on this webinar to know that there is a distinction between tagging something with a value and taking the action. So we might tag something as this is rot. That doesn't mean it's instantly deleted simply because it is rot. So separating the tag from the action, we're very big on that at Valora. We want to tag everything first and kind of see the lay of the land by tags. And then when it's time to action, you can either action individually, but better is to action based on tag. So, okay, I want to actually pull the trigger. I want to actually delete things that have these criteria. Yes, they're rot. They're older than 10 years. They're from a part of the business that we divested 6 years ago. Whatever your parameters are, each one of those is going to be a tag. So you're managing the actioning, the dispositioning by tag. So it's important to know you have kind of almost like two layers of kind of security and inner peace about this. You have the tag itself, which you could debate or change or if you or make more comprehensive, and then you have the actioning based on those tags.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Other things to consider, and we call these second level considerations because this is the harsh reality of, where can things go wrong? So overcoming those gotchas, first of all, and anticipating issues before they even come. So, understanding and appreciating the time to implement a system like this. It is not hand over the keys and go. We're talking about a giant data corpus of decades of data that it will be analyzing. So understanding that it is not magic. Like every other type of AI, there is absolutely a human in the loop, and while it is a machine algorithms and machine learning algorithms, kind of in that AI bucket, you're always tweaking. So understanding and appreciating the time that it does take to implement a system like this is key. I will say another objection in that first bucket is often comes from the IT group. where, there's buy-in from, departments and information governance. Then they bring IT and they say, yeah, Microsoft can do this. And that is kind of, now you're back to square one because you don't have that understanding or that buy-in from the IT department. So bringing them again from the beginning through, demos and through building your priorities and your business processes with a tool like this will be very valuable. So it's not like poo-pooed at the 11th hour. In that middle bucket where things can go wrong, over promising results. This is not going to solve world peace and make your coffee. It is, again, software algorithms. It is going in and it's doing its analysis, whatever, but it is not magic. Again, so not only the time, but then the kind of the background, what's happening in the background, because there's a lot of moving parts in the background. So kind of setting expectations internally on, what happens when during a Delta scan, as an example, is we think is very important to understand for the IG team and for other stakeholders before and during implementation. And that third bucket is looking beyond kind of what we're starting with now. So, we always have an eye to the future to say, okay, maybe we start with a pilot and we're going to look specifically for ROT or for records, but always thinking what other use cases can we kind of bring into the fold. So, always kind of having that eye for what's to come or what we might find or what we might want to implement. So you got your case, you got your team, you got your budget, you got your plan. Once you've got all of that and you are ready, how do you get started? And this is often a question, and we help folks through this, but how do you get started? And one of the best places to start is with a pilot, because it's measured. It is a targeted data set with very specific measurements and KPIs. We're going to go in here, we're going to find this, we're going to do this, we're going to automate this, we're going to blah. So really having a very well-defined pilot is a great place to start because it proves how effective the tool is on your data, and it also proves ROI right off the bat. Again, we're always looking forward with that eye on future use cases. So while we may do a pilot looking at maybe just one or two use cases, always thinking, what are we going to add? How are we going to do this? How are we going to implement this so that more people can take advantage? The third is definitely measuring results. So when we have a pilot, it's a great opportunity, yes, for you to make sure that the tool is working on your data, but it's also a great opportunity for us to benchmark the results of your actual data. Every organization's data is different. When we say 25 terabytes, that can mean a lot. I mean, okay, literally it's a data volume, I understand that, but it can be very different data sets between a volume of data. When we're going in and analyzing text, we do a full text analysis, we do OCR, all of those things. So understanding what your data is and how it's reacting to an auto classification solution is really valuable. And then building on that success, proving out ROI functionality in different departments and different groups, and then spreading the word. Going into maybe showing other departments what you're doing, showing other, stakeholders what you're doing and how things are going, and then maybe designing and implementing and growing into those areas as well. Cool. How long is that going to take? And it entirely depends on how complex your environment is, what you're looking to do, and how much data you have. So we're talking weeks and months, but we can kind of guess with you and give you an idea of how long that baseline processing is going to take. But this is a perpetual system. It's not like, great, we're going to go and scan everything, see ya. We are literally scanning all of the time and implementing and accounting for new information. So it's not really a one and done kind of thing, as you know. But with the phased implementation, we will sit down with you and we will help with the planning. We will develop the KPIs for that proof of concept to make sure that you are really going to see what you need to see and what you want to see from your data from a proof of concept. And then we will, after that proof of concept, that's when we scale. That's when we go operational and start to add environments, we start to add data sets, we start to add different repositories, and then again, going back and doing it all again.
Do you want me to jump in here, Jen?
Sure.
So we thought it would be helpful to kind of give you a little checklist to walk away with, that if you can basically say yes to each of the bullets on this slide, then yes, you are ready to implement auto classification. So the obvious question is, well, what if you don't have all of them? You can get there. Using a pilot is a good time to kind of check off the missing ones, and kind of getting your organization on board and maybe putting some vendors through the vetting process is a good way to kind of test the internal appetite for something like this. So there are things that you can do that are on this list that are relatively low stakes, low cost, just to see, is it, is it sticking, or am I getting resistance, in this? But if you're looking for the, am I ready? I think I'm ready. Can I check, let's say 75% of these? Then yeah, you're ready. And if you're not, a good vendor, Valora, certainly we will help you get ready for these. But if you want the list, here's the list. I get asked for it all the time. So here you go. And then we thought in the last 5 minutes, you can go ahead, Jen. We thought we would take you through a little bit of what does it actually look like when we go, okay, I got the budget, I've got the contract, I've got the data set, I've got my core team, go, let's go. These are some of the things that you will actually go through with us as part of getting your initial, let's say your pilot off the ground. So one of the things that you'll do, and for the IT folks that might be on the call, if we're going to be standing this up inside your cloud, we are going to hand you what I call the bill of lading, which is, this is the infrastructure you're going to have to stand up. So for the IG folks on the call, you kind of need this order form to hand to somebody in your IT team or your infrastructure team to say, give me this. So that is something that we will provide to you as really as a starting point. Over time, these items are going to get larger as more and more data kind of goes through the system, but you'll need at least some sort of starting infrastructure, and that is something that we will hand to you. Okay, next up. I think it was from the client scoping. Yeah. So when you're ready to kind of really sit down and sort of start making decisions about your data and what you want, there are lots of little things that come up. Like, it's easy for us to go, yeah, that's rot, that's rot. Well, what exactly are you considering rot? We all know it's duplicates, right? Okay, got that part. Okay, other than duplicates, there's lots of different things that might qualify as trivial, for example, or obsolete. Maybe a version of a contract that's not the signed copy. Maybe that counts as obsolete. So we will kind of sit down and go through with you a bunch of different items and we'll give you the recommendation of what most people do, but you have some decisions that you can make, whether you agree, disagree, whether there's something unique in your organization or in your industry, where I'll give you an example. Typically, we would recommend that email auto replies be considered rot, as trivial. And every now and then an organization's like, no, it's critically important that we hang on to that, and it shows that the email was delivered or whatever it shows. We cannot include that in rot. Okay, that's fine. That becomes a distinction for your implementation versus the other one over there. So that's just an example of the kind of discussion that we'll get into. And then towards the end of your pilot mode or your first phase, you are going to be in a position to kind of say yes or no that the software is doing the things that it's supposed to do. We accomplish that with user acceptance testing, and that is literally kind of a checklist of things that you will be asked to say, yes, the software did do this. Yes, I was able to retrieve this. Yes, the performance is as advertised, etc. So that helps both prove to everyone that you got what you paid for, and it also helps establish that ROI, that you did in fact get all this delicious benefit from the thing that you contracted for. So these are just examples. There's plenty more where this came from, but wanted to give you all a taste. Hey, what is it like to work with Valora? But really, what is it like to work on a real auto classification implementation? These are snippets of a day in the life, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Sandy. And I realize we're right at the hour. It is exactly 2 o'clock. So we have filled that 60 minutes right to the brim. So I thank you very much for your time this afternoon and for your attention. Do we have any questions in there, Sandy, that we want to?
I didn't see any come through, but happy to stick around
Okay.
for a minute if anyone wants to post a question.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you don't feel comfortable posting here, please feel free to send us an email. These are our email addresses here. You can get a hold of us. But after this webinar, I will certainly send out the slides and a recording of this so you can go back to it. And I will also send that ROI calculator so that you can plug in your values and see where you can get that most return. Great. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we will see you next time.
Bye.